atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a Kamen Rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and joining me, as always, my lovely co-host.
Hello, I am Rex.
And that is the awkwardest and weirdest transition that I've ever had to do for audio that will never, ever, 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 ever come out.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what I'm talking about either. I'm kind of crazy.
I have no idea what you're talking about. The editor's going to have to tell me later.
Yeah, he's gonna have to slip you the post-it note of what we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, it's November now.
What? Where did October go?
Well, 3 weeks. That's where it went. It went 3 weeks.
Huh.
Yeah.
Fancy that.
Did you have a good Halloween?
I don't know.
I'll
figure
either.
that out.
Well, next recording, we'll figure that out if we have a good time or not. Yeah. How have you been?
Pretty good, for the most part. It's been an interesting day.
It's been an awful day.
Hey, at least we had the World of Yamazaki program.
Yeah. So usually we just kind of dive in, but I have had such a rocky prep for this thing that I want to complain about it, and you are going to hear about it.
Oh boy.
Okay. So,
buckle up.
I was preparing. This all started about, let's say about 12 hours ago. I watched the main part of this episode's program, got through it, had my notes, great. Watched the next thing for the program, got it through, done, great. Didn't have time to watch the other two things, so I got in, took a shower, got ready, went, got my energy drinks, drove here. Then you and I had a lovely day because you and I enjoyed a nice Yamazaki television special. It was great. Everything was wonderful. And then we were getting ready to finish up by watching the three things we had to watch before this. And then the app didn't want to work. No audio would go through for us to watch it together. And then when we tried to export it, it only gave us a 5-minute export window. And then it just kept breaking. And then all of the recording stuff kept saying that we didn't have cameras or microphones. And it was...
Particularly on your end.
Yeah. I was not going to lie. I was about to grab my disk drive and walk out and chuck it into the street. I was livid. I was about done. There was about to be no more Kaiju Conversation. It was no bueno. But we're here now.
Thankfully.
Maybe.
Who knows? Maybe we'll die before the recording's over.
I wouldn't be surprised. But, so last week, we talked about Ryuhei Kitamura's Versus.
Yes. An absolutely wonderful film.
Which has a lot of spin-off, prequel stuff, background history, yada, 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 whatever.
Right.
So we talked about a short film called Down to Hell that Kitamura did a few years prior to Versus. And we will be talking about that as Kitamura uploaded it with English subs to YouTube. It's available officially. So we'll be talking about that. But there's also 2 side stories available on the Blu-ray from Arrow Video. And there's a 20-minute edit of the film called Versus FF. There's also Ultimate Versus, but we'll save that for a main episode.
Another day.
Another day. But for now,
we're going to be... We'll save that one for later.
Yeah, we will. We absolutely will. But for this, we will be talking about Nervous, or I'm going to give it the full title, Versus Side Story Nervous. And then its sequel, Versus Side Story Nervous 2, Versus FF, And finally, we're going to end on the film that started this whole thing, Down to Hell. So, why don't we dive into Nervous?
Okay.
So, I have like a little bit of background on this, and then that's about it.
Okay.
All I have is basically Nervous is a prequel to the events of Versus.
Mm-hmm.
It follows the two cop guys as the cop that loses his right hand interrogates somebody. I believe it was directed by Yudai Yamaguchi.
Yamaguchi? Yeah. I think both were directed by Yamaguchi.
Yes. And it has Shoichiro Matsumoto and Yukihito Takado in it, reprising their reprising their roles as one-handed cop and Super Cleaner.
Top Breeder.
So Rex, what Top Breeder? That's for the sequel. We'll talk about that.
I'm pretty sure they said Top Breeder in Versus.
No, they said Super Cleaner. Oh, you meant in Versus? No, I don't think they said.
Maybe I'm crazy.
Remember. I think you're crazy. I don't remember them
saying Super Cleaner in Versus either.
Well, they said Super Cleaner and Nervous.
Yeah.
I think his whole spiel... his whole
shtick is having a bunch of ridiculous top titles.
Yeah. So why don't you give us the rundown of Nervous?
Alrighty, so Nervous is basically like a 5 or 6 minute short of the one-handed cop prior to losing his one hand interrogating a bartender about some criminal he's looking for. It's not really stated who said criminal is, although I kind of interpret it to probably be like Tatsuo's character, is my guess.
I agree.
So yeah, in this room, there's already some bodies in it, some bleeding bodies, so they are not dead for now. Never know what could happen later. Yeah, basically, he sits the bartender down and asks him about his original questioning and how, asked him about the man he was looking for and all that. Huh?
And the wording of how he answered the
specifically
questions.
Looking to ask the wording of like what did the bartender refer to this detective as? Specifically, the bartender is completely confused by this, and the detective talks about how he loved cop shows growing up and all that sort of spiel, basically giving a little bit of backstory about him, and then gives a couple hints to the bartender, and when the bartender finally realizes what he originally said was, "Did something happen, officer?" the detective just snaps and starts beating him and explains that he just does not go by the title officer and will only accept a detective.
Right. And in this, it's kind of funny. So in this spiel, he does say that his right hand is his pride.
Right.
And like that, I love that. Like, that's a very clever little like wink at what's to come. I think that's a really genius way to go about that.
Right. Just as he's threatening him, the sniper cop from Versus just appears in the room suddenly.
And then our bartender's given the option of die by gun, die by the right hand of pride, or let his partner deal with him. And the bartender apologizes, but when he apologizes, he says, "detective," which completely flips his opinion on the bartender and says, "You've grown up," and like just walks out, which leaves the other officer, detective, policeman,
to clean up his mess,
pick up the bodies. Which we get a beautiful like final joke where the bartender's looking, and the detective says, "Don't worry, I used to work at what was it? It was a sanitation center or something
facility.
like that."
Yeah, something like that.
And he says, "I am a super cleaner." And then he picks up the bodies and walks out, and our bartender's like, "Super cleaner?" And then he says, "That sounds like a made-up job." Or no, he doesn't say that. He says, "There's no way that guy's a cop." That's the line he says at the end, and then it cuts away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of cool to get a little bit of background on the cops here, or the detective, and why he's...
It's a little bit of fun, but I don't know. It feels so disconnected that I kind of just... it's not really much point to it, I'd say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's kind of just there.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to move on to the second short film, versus side story, Nervous 2.
Yes.
Which serves as an epilogue. Where both Matsumoto's and Takikado are in... thank you. And they're in a nursing facility?
I guess. Remember, previously on Versus, the one-handed cop had a sniper bullet go through his entire face, and the other one blown up from a sniper bullet.
Now, the crazy Yakuza guy made it out okay, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think if I remember right, he kind of just disappears after he encounters them. Oh no, he gets knocked out by Tak or something like that.
That's right. So
and then I think he disappears.
Now those three are all in a nursing facility together, and they all have amnesia.
Yes.
So they can't remember anything. But and so they're all friends with each other.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of like nice little like back and forth between them. Yeah. And they just chit chat a lot. And then suddenly a new person arrives. And they're like, "Who is this guy?" And they find out that he took a bullet to the head.
Mm.
And the weird thing is he still remembers things. So he goes over after a little bit and talks to the three and is like, "Don't you remember me?" And then he just starts saying these little keywords like dog and officer and what was the other one? Was it forest?
I don't remember what the other one was.
I don't remember what the other one was either. But essentially it's officer triggers the one-handed cop.
Mm-hmm.
Dog triggers
the top breeder. And then it was I want to say it was Forrest. Forrest triggers the crazy Yakuza guy. And they all suddenly remember. Maybe. And they all suddenly remember who each other is and what happened. And then we get a fight between them. Also, before this, there's a funny thing where the crazy Yakuza guy talks about the ICU, and the one-handed cop's like Lucy Liu. That's a pretty funny moment. Oh yeah. Also, ignoring the absolute elephant in the room of like the cop who was blown up is mostly fine. He's just got a cast around his leg and like one of his arms, which then disappears once they realize who each other is. His arm cast just goes away. And then the other guy who had a hole in his face, he's just got a massive scar around his face. It's like they glued it back on or something.
And then our crazy Yakuza guy has a bandage around his nose.
Right.
So the moment they realize who each other is, the crazy Yakuza guy and the one-handed cop are fighting. The new guy, we find out, is the one who the cop shot.
Yeah.
And he's like getting ignored this whole time because nobody remembers or knows who he is.
I didn't even realize who he was at first. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Who the hell is this guy?
And so they keep fighting, and the one-handed cop punches the crazy Yakuza guy, and his face gets all bloodied again, which is it's a funny callback.
Right.
The top breeder pulls off his casts and starts fighting, and they're all fighting. And then to kind of pay off the ICU comment from earlier, the two doctors or nurses are watching from afar. There's only one room.
After ditching an old man in a wheelchair who's now just falling, tumbling down.
But the funniest part of this happens after all of this. Like, we were both chuckling at this, but after this, it's revealed there's only one room in the ICU open. So they all four have to share a room. And then for the next 2 minutes, we just get this, like, intercut between the heart monitors in their bodies, and the heart monitor lines start attacking each other.
and their bodies keep reacting.
That got me good. That got me a good
That was
laugh.
really unexpected and real. I loved how creative that was. That's like actually a perfect setup and payoff.
I really liked that. That's probably my favorite.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Nervous. I was not expecting much from either, but no, Nervous 2 was actually really fun. I think what helped is that it actually feels like Versus.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
I don't know. Nervous just kind of has a different tone and feeling to Versus. Like, there's a bit. I guess it's meant to be comedic still, with the one-handed cop like being so serious and all that, with not wanting to be called officer. But I don't know. It just felt a bit. I don't know. The humor felt less pronounced, I guess. It just didn't quite feel like Versus. And I also feel like having the runt there in Nervous 2 really helps to, and the actual like comedic banter between them as well.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that really helps it actually feel like Versus.
I agree. And I think part of that too is, so Nervous 2 had a budget of 10,000 yen, which I mean is like not a lot at all. But it's still, it clearly had more than Nervous 1. Nervous 1 doesn't, it looks like it was shot on a camcorder. It's one set, four actors, roughly, maybe 5, probably 4.
It's like 4
and
or 5, yeah.
It's shrouded in shadow. There's not a lot to it. It was probably shot, to be honest, in a closet at Napalm Films. Truth be told, I feel like that could be a very high likelihood. Whereas Nervous 2 had a couple of different locations. Yudai Yamaguchi directed it as well. And it just had a bigger cast. You had Minoru Matsumoto from Versus, who was also in Kamen Rider Den-O, I'm Born, Longinus, Godzilla Final Wars, and Alive, and he was additional crew for Down to Hell. You had Shoichiro Matsumoto, who was in Versus. You had Yukihito Tanikaido. Did I say that right, finally?
Tanikaido.
Who was in Alive and Versus. Taro Kanazawa, that was in Alive, Longinus, Godzilla Final Wars, and Alien vs. Ninja. Yumi Kikuchi, who was in Sky High, Longinus, and Godzilla Final Wars, and Kane Utani, who was in Sky High, Battlefield Baseball, and Longinus.
I also want to point out that I think this is also I feel like this is also the first time Daisuke Yano has been a composer for something even related to Ryuhei Kitamura, being Nervous too.
What did he do?
Daisuke Yano is one of the composers for Final Wars.
Oh.
And he's credited for composing Nervous 2 as well as Versus' actual composer Nobuhiko Morino.
Gotcha. Yeah, he also composed Love, Death for Kitamura. Final Wars, he composed Battlefield Baseball, which was a film that Kitamura co-produced, or just produced. And then he was also the composer for Alive and Sky High. So, I didn't notice that. Good eye. So, I agree. I liked Nervous 2 way more. I chuckled at it more. I had a little bit more fun with it. I like the camera angles of Nervous 1 more. I think Nervous 1's a little more creative with its angles and its cinematography. But I think Nervous 2, I mean, part of it too is Nervous 2 is like 2 times the length of Nervous 1.
Right.
Being 15 minutes instead of 5 minutes. But no, I think Nervous 2 is a little bit better just for the characters.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really enjoyed Nervous 2. That was a genuine good surprise for me.
Do you have... I got nothing else really left to talk about. We're kind of brushing through these kind of fast, but I mean, they're only like 20 minutes
They're
total.
pretty short, all things considered, so it's not really surprising.
Speaking of short...
This might be the shortest Kaiju Conversation episode in like a year or two.
Maybe. We'll see. It all depends on how quickly we get through the fast forward version of Versus and Down to Hell.
Right. Boy, I wonder if fast forward Versus will be quick. It's almost like it's on fast forward.
I definitely have some thoughts, so why don't we dive into the plot of it, and then we'll talk about our thoughts.
All right. So the plot of Fast Forward Versus is Versus, but without almost everything.
Yeah, so I wrote down the movie and how it flows. Do you want me to kind of go through that real quick, or do you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So we start off with the samurai fight from the beginning of the film, which is never addressed again in the film. So it almost feels pointless. After this, it's cut straight to the Yakuza entrance. So we have it's just boom, right to the Yakuza.
Yep, no context of Tak or the other guy escaping prison or any of that.
There's no establishing plot. There's nothing. And then it cuts to the establishment of the kidnapping.
Right.
Where we get the line of Tak Sakaguchi saying, "I'm a feminist."
I'm a feminist. I'm glad they kept that in. Important line in the movie.
It's so the way I kind of interpreted this is these are what makes Versus special.
Yeah, this is kind of like a best of Versus compilation, really.
Yeah. So after this, it jumps to the beginning of the fight after Tak Sakaguchi and the girl escape from the Yakuza, and the Yakuza with glasses chases after them. We get the beginning of their fight, but that's all we get.
Right, yeah. And it's so jarring, too. Like you get the scene where Tak just... Like, as soon as Tak gets the runt's gun and makes him shoot the first Yakuza man that he kills in the movie, we just completely skip to that scene of Tak in the forest with the girl. And as you said, like, meeting the other guy. He's just got all new clothes and everything.
Right. It's like, what are we doing here? But honestly, the thing that made me more upset is following this, we cut to Tak Sakaguchi fighting off a character. It's supposed to be a zombie, but it's just a character.
Yeah, and that's something as well that I was going to bring up. The zombies they're just not really established at all.
No, they're not. The zombies are completely cut. The only thing zombie related,
they are there, like at the beginning, but like the samurai kills some zombies, and like the characters who turn into zombies later are there, but like none of that is actually established that they're zombies. They just have a bunch of scars on their face.
Right. And it's like, why? Like, I love the zombies. Why are we like cutting that? Like, I feel like that's one of Versus's biggest like welcoming factors is the zombies. So why would you cut that?
Right. No, they compose a lot of what makes Versus fun as well.
But following this, we get the very end of Tak Sakaguchi fighting the Yakuza leader as the girl is taken away.
But which is like you just see one shot of her with the runt guy, and like then we just like immediately cut to the introduction of the cop plot. For some reason, that is included here.
Which, even in the actual movie, that's pointless. So, introducing
but at least
them...
it's funny in the movie and kind of works. Here, it doesn't... It's introduced, they cut back to it once more, and they don't even keep the conclusion to it.
Right. And it's like, why include them? Like,
why don't give them the time when, you know, this is a 20-minute cut of Versus. You are jumping through everything. This is already incoherent enough, you know?
Right. And what's even like following this, we cut to the assassins, which we don't like. There's no reason for them to be in this besides they suddenly appear later on in the film.
Right.
So
and
like
then immediately after they show up, you know, the man shows up. And then after he shows up, it immediately cuts to him licking the female assassin.
Right, and there's like no like there's nothing like it's jumping around way too much. There is like in the description it says that this is a 20-minute cut of Versus that somehow still flows very well, and I don't see that.
I don't know about that one, Chief.
I don't see where fast forward Versus flows. If you cut some of the parts...
Flow is not this thing's middle name, I'll tell you that much.
No. If you're wanting to... So, I'll tell you what I would cut from this cut at the end.
Plot, cut that, obviously. That is the most obvious thing to cut, I feel like.
Well, what's funny is this after the man licks the female assassin, we jump back to
cut to that.
To the cops in the large gun. And then we're back to the redhead assassin fighting Tak Sakaguchi, who's now a zombie, but that's never established.
Right.
They keep the line of the man saying, "Do you want to die or do you want to live?" But like that could be taken into a different context now because they cut it.
I mean, there's no context for it.
And you know, they fight for like 2 seconds, and then
we cut to the man with the redhead zombie,
and the man killing him.
Right,
which I get, like it's like Tak's statement of "I'm a feminist," and in the introduction of the cops, in this where he punches him through the head, where it's like maybe this was meant to just be a best of reel.
Right. Yeah. No. This and Tak's feminist line definitely feel like it's meant to be a best of reel. Absolutely.
And I just, God. So what's funny is as soon as this is done, they cut to the beginning of the final fight, where.
Well, the first they just have a shot of the other female assassin, like knocking out Tak. They show her doing like her pose, and then we cut to the start of the final fight.
Right, and it's like, who is she? Why did she do that? Why established.
Did you show that? What was the point of showing that?
Then we cut to the establishment of the fight, where all the characters are there. We see Tak kill the Yakuza on the motorcycle. He shoots him, and then everybody else just disappears.
They all crawl down. We get them all established, and then we just cut to Tak going to fight the man.
Right. And it's not even the full fight. It's like
No.
a minute of that fight.
Right.
And then what's even worse is as we're about to see the finale, the final blow, it cuts to the future fight.
Yeah, the final shot of the movie, and it's like, what?
Like, it could have been cool if they, like, edited it in a way where, like, that fight faded or transitioned into the fight with a, like,
Sure.
title of, like, 99 years later kind of saying that this fight never really ended.
That could work, but
you would have had
No.
to actually go in and edit it instead of just
Right.
cutting it. And what sucks is, so the future fight lasts for, like, 5 seconds.
because it's literally just the last shot of the movie.
And then it cuts to the credits, which the credits are a fifth of this movie. Literally. I swear to God, they have to be at least 4 minutes long. Which is a fifth. A fifth of this movie are the credits. Just speed it up. Do something. I don't get it. Like, here's the thing. Cut the 2 cop scenes. Cut the female assassin knocking Tak out.
Right.
Cut the samurai opening shot.
I was about to say, cut that out. If we're not going to actually do anything with the zombies, if we're going to cut all their screen time out, why keep that in?
Yeah, cut the first fight. Literally just have it the Yakuza show up, the kidnapping is established, Tak and the girl get away, the man appears, the man kills, I mean, the man could, like, showcase killing all of them, and then bringing them back, then have the final fight, them all die, and then Tak killing the man.
Right.
Speed up the credits by half, like, make it so it's half the length. Boom. You have a very condensed version of Versus that gets just the basic concept of the movie and is not this disaster of a 20-minute edit. This is like the statement, oh, you can just edit the Godzilla movies to just the kaiju action and it'll be fine. No, it won't. No, it won't.
You see,
This
even
is
if
a
that
prime
had
example.
an argument, this thing, it cuts down all the fights to nothing. It gets rid of, like, half the best moments of the fights.
I don't really understand the existence of this version.
That's what I was about to ask. Why does this exist?
See, and I don't know, like, there's no info on the Arrow set about this film, this version.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't find anything on it either. I don't understand this.
And see, that's the thing is, like, why, like, it almost feels like this was just something that was locked away that they found and were like, let's just put this out. Like, we did this and it was pointless, but...
Like, the only thing I can think of is, like, some sort of, like, show reel or something like that. That's, like, the only purpose I can think of.
Right. Like, there's not even, like, if you go to IMDb and you look at alternative versions, there's not even, like, any, like, clarification of there's a 20-minute version of the film. So, like, I don't know. I don't understand, like... This movie, this clip show has no reason to exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, no, this is awful. If you want to watch a condensed version of Versus, this is not what you watch.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, just for God's sake, just go watch Versus. It's way more fun.
Honestly,
it's 2 hours long, but it's the most adrenaline film. Some of the most adrenaline-filled 2 hours of your life.
Honestly, I want to say I tried to watch. So I think I've watched Nervous before, but, like, this was my first time actually sitting and watching Nervous and Nervous 2 and Versus FF. If it wasn't for the fact that you and I were watching it, I probably would have given up watching it. Like, I could not stand it. It is awful.
Right. Again, why does it exist?
It's pointless. But speaking of existing, none of this would exist without a short film from 1997.
Yes.
Now, I seemingly have forgotten what the title of that movie
Oh,
is.
for God's sake, you said it earlier, man.
Did I?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little short film by the title of Down to Hell.
That's right. Yes. So we briefly talked about it in our Versus episode, and I should say this now. If you haven't listened to that, you should probably listen to that before you listen to us talk about the two side stories that happened before and after
Right.
the edited version.
Unless you've seen Versus, you might have no idea. You probably have no idea what the hell we're even talking about if you haven't at least listened or watched the movie, you know?
Right. So you probably need some context. And some of what we said in that will help establish Down to Hell, but we're just going to dive right in. I do have a little bit of production notes.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have a lot. I just have, it was shot in 10 days on a 6-man cast and crew with about $3,000. But it did very well critically. It actually won first prize at the Indies Movie Film Festival, which is where Kitamura got the money to start funding Versus, which Versus was supposed to be a sequel to Down to Hell.
Right, even being called Down to Hell 2 early on.
Right. I don't have any other production notes. Did you find anything else?
Not really, no.
Okay. So let's go ahead. It's 47 minutes. Let's go ahead and dive into it, and
Right.
I'll let you take the lead.
So, Down to Hell opens with a just man getting stabbed by some young people. I kind of interpret it as maybe they're Yakuza, but it's not.
I kind of
really
interpreted it
elaborated
that way.
But it doesn't really matter if they are or not. I mean, really, it's probably more just young delinquents rather than straight up Yakuza, since none of them
Actually,
are really dressed like Yakuza.
Their credits are thugs. So
thugs. Yeah, so basically just delinquents, thugs. Same deal.
Now, I will say, from the get-go, the film is very clearly Kitamura with how the shots are done.
Oh, yeah.
And angled and edits. Like, it's very clearly Kitamura. Like,
oh, yeah.
Watching Versus and Down to Hell, you basically get the idea of how Kitamura's style works.
Right. You've got the camera work, you've got, like, with that, the zoom-ins, you've got the editing, the violence, and the music, given this has Nobuhiko Morino as the composer, who composed Versus and also was one of the composers for Final Wars. After the credits to this, we cut to, in the city, a salary man is just walking down the street as a car seemingly follows him. He gets suspicious of it, but the car seems to leave before coming around the corner to chase him.
Mm-hmm.
The car hits him. The 4 thugs come out and take him. They put him in the trunk and take him into the forest.
Which, it's worthy to note, up until this point, there has not been one line of dialogue. And this is about 5 minutes in, which is actually like almost is that almost a sixth of the film, I think? Or no. So after this,
it's 1/10 of the film.
1/10. After this, it cuts to them opening the trunk, right? And up.
Yeah.
So at the 5 minutes and 54-second mark, almost 6 minutes in, the first line of dialogue is said. So that's actually pretty like significant for a film like this. Like, if you can like take that into consideration for like a 2-hour movie, what would a 10th of that be? Like, that would be pretty big. That would be, so that'd be 10 minutes. That'd be That would be about 11 minutes into the film.
Yeah, 12 to 15 minutes ish.
So taking that into consideration, that's actually pretty. I respect films that can go a long time without saying a single line of dialogue. I think that's a really genius idea, especially if it doesn't linger, which I don't think Down to Hell really lingers.
I mean, I don't think Kitamura knows how to really linger. I don't think that's really in his style.
I disagree with that, and I will tell you why as we continue through this plot.
Okay. One thing I also want to bring up, another sign of Kitamura's style you can see, as the thugs get out and we cut between the thugs from at a low angle to a high angle looking down upon this random man they've kidnapped. I should bring up how every character in this movie looks distinct.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar to Versus and Final Wars in that sense, because it seems with Kitamura's movies, almost every character has a very distinct look. Like, you can always tell who's who in his stuff, which is something I really appreciate personally.
Right.
Because I like actually knowing who I'm following.
Now, I will say there are two characters that wear white hoodies that get a little confusing.
Right. I did get a little confused at one point near the end, but that, honestly, I think that was more my fault for not paying close enough attention to the clothing.
See, that might be my problem as well, because I admittedly kind of lost attention towards the end. But no, and what's really cool is you see Ryuhei Kitamura was an actor in this film, and you see it in this scene. But during the scene,
he's one of the thugs.
Yes, we're established what the plot of this movie is supposed to be, which is the thugs abduct people, bring them out to a forest that's like far enough away where they can't get help. They throw people out and they say, "You have 10 minutes to run away from us. And after 10 minutes, we will come hunting for you. And if we find you, we will kill you. But if we don't find you, you will live." Kind of like The Most Dangerous Game, or like for me, I immediately went to Predators, because that's kind of what Predators does.
Oh, there's moments in this where I just reminded me a lot of the original Predator. Like, there's a moment later where one of the characters is getting chased and they jump down a cliff, and the way it's shot reminded me so much of the scene where Arnold jumps down into the waterfall, like after pretty much almost everyone else has been killed.
Right. So our main character tries to get out of it. He clearly can't, so he runs off. Is he our main character? I don't know if we have a main character in this movie.
I guess, yeah. Who's the
this is an ensemble.
Who's the antagonist, really, in this film?
This is an ensemble. I don't think there's actually a main character. I think this would be considered an ensemble.
No distinct one, at least.
So he runs off. This is when the soundtrack for me really was very noticeable, and I do love this soundtrack. I think this is a very fun soundtrack. And then for the next 10 minutes, it's kind of he's trying to run away as one of the people finds him, and they're kind of fighting and trying to not die.
Right, yeah.
Maybe a little less than 10, maybe 7 or 8.
Something roughly around that amount of time.
I know it ends before the 25-minute mark, roughly.
Yeah.
Because, so, what happens is the thug ends up killing our salaryman, and he goes back to get the rest of his group to come and get the body. Oh, no, they're going to bury the body. He goes back so they can get the stuff and bury the body.
Right.
Now, when they get back, the body's not there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and before the body had disappeared, we'd got some Evil Dead-esque shots of, the camera just rushing towards the body and all that as well.
Yeah, there's a little bit of Evil Dead influence in here.
Right. I feel it's more obvious here than it is in Versus, actually. Even though
I agree.
Talk about it in Versus.
I agree, and I think part of that too is the whole low budget aspect. Down to Hell was a lot lower budget than Versus, and I think this was I would venture to say Down to Hell was Kitamura being a little more like, oh, I can do this too, whereas Versus was like, this is me.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I view it, at least. Like his other short film and Down to Hell were kind of like the I can do this, and then Versus was like his whole like, this is the Ryuhei Kitamura experience.
Right. After they realize the body is not there, they decide to go back to their car and leave to come back the next day. But before that, they split up. The long-haired guy gets to the car first, and once the others get there, they try to get him to, start driving. But he has a knife in his mouth.
Right, which freaks them all out, and they're like, they don't know what to do.
Yeah,
and
but Kitamura decides they should just chase after the salaryman.
And so he runs off. The other two kind of debate, and then they eventually go off to help Kitamura. Now,
right.
Kitamura's
but before
left
they can
alone.
Get to him, the salaryman shows up, has a little fight, and ends up punching through to Kitamura's guts and ripping out his intestines before dragging his corpse with the intestines. Somehow they don't break, and he hangs the body with the intestines.
Now, this is where we need to establish that the salaryman has turned into a zombie. It's not a very gore. It's a very low budget version of a zombie. It's also kind of a unique take because, like, the zombie has strength. He's not hungry for flesh.
I mean, honestly, it's kind of more like a Deadite from Evil Dead, just without all the talking and like mockery.
Right. So I loved the gut punch. I thought that was actually really impressive for like how low budget this film was.
Right.
And I thought that added a little bit of like, oh, okay, so this thing is like could like kill us. Like this thing is like actually deadly.
It kills
him. Which following this, we get kind of the final fight. So this is past the 30-minute mark. We're about at like 32 minutes of the 47-minute runtime.
Mm-hmm.
And we get basically the final fight, which is the 2 versus the 1.
Right.
Now, admittedly, this is where I started to lose focus because this fight lasts.
Actually, yeah, I will. I'll actually agree with you there. It's a bit too long. I think part of the issue is, just one of them gets like knocked out pretty early on into the fight, and then he kind of disappears up until like near the end, and it doesn't help that I didn't realize he was meant to still be. I was kind of like, is he dead or is he alive?
Right, because he rolls off the side of the hill.
Right. And then because the short is mostly in black and white, I didn't really realize that it was meant to be him when he showed back up later originally. So I kind of had to go back and I'm like, wait a minute.
Right. Yeah, no, I kind of had that problem. The only reason I could determine that there was 2 was because of one of the final shots.
I didn't realize at first, and then I kind of realized, I'm like, oh, wait. This guy has different hair, and one's wearing a hoodie, one's in like a singlet.
Yeah. So one of our 2 thugs gets knocked out, like you said. The other one like is running away and fighting.
Right.
And he ends up. Okay, this is where I admittedly am like, I don't know what is going on. So why don't you kind of take the lead here?
So, yeah, okay. The salaryman zombie deadite thing, the 2 have a fight. Salaryman tries waterboarding him, essentially, but the thug ends up getting a log from the a log of wood from the water, hitting him over the head. Then, he shows right back up. And, okay, eventually when they're back on to land, the thug at this point I don't know what the exact move is called, but he essentially lifts him up, spins around, and throws the salaryman down, on impaling him on a stick, right? Game over. And then this is where the other guy finally reappears. And it is established that, like, it's him coming back. We're just both stupid for not realizing.
Well, at this point, I was so bored because the fight... So the thing about this fight is...
The fight does last a bit too long.
It's like a 7 or 8 minute fight. It's not... It doesn't have the bombastic score that Versus would have. It doesn't have the colors.
It just isn't as good as well.
Right.
It's not as... It's just not as effective. And I mean, for a fight in a low budget short film, it's not bad. Expected. Yeah, like, all things considered, it's not that bad. It's actually pretty good for what it is, but it still lingers on for
right.
So I'll agree with you there. Actually, I'll agree with you.
But he comes back and he sees the corpse impaled,
but it looks like himself.
That's why I got confused. So he goes down, he's investigating, he's confused. Then the corpse reaches up, grabs him, and starts pulling him in.
Yeah.
And if he goes too far in, he's going to get stabbed and he's going to die.
Which happens. And then we cut to like another angle of this, and the Deadite is not there.
And I was wondering if that was like a mistake, or like
the Deadite is constantly teleporting throughout the short, to be fair.
So is it a zombie?
I don't know. I'm calling it a Deadite because that's basically the closest thing I can think of to what it is.
Right, because it has superhuman strength, it has intelligence, it has the power of teleportation.
Right.
It has the power to mimic.
It's basically just a slasher villain.
Yeah. It's a little different than the zombies you would see in Versus.
Right. But yeah, the last remaining thug, the one who had seemingly killed the Deadite, gets back to the car, throws down the body that was already in there, gets in. But then he looks to his side and realizes that Kitamura's body is there. And Kitamura's body looks at him. He looks back at the body he threw out of the car, and that body turns to look at him. Behind him, the guy who had just gotten impaled is in the back seat. And who's in the final remaining seat? The salaryman.
Which I love. Like, that was a cool twist. I think that's a really cool twist.
That's a cool ending.
And then instead of like showing any death or anything, it just cuts to the title card.
Apparently, Tak Sakaguchi and Kenji Matsuda were PAs for this.
Yeah. So for your casting crew, you had Ryuhei Kitamura as actor, writer, director, producer, and editor. He, of course, wrote and directed Versus, wrote and directed Alive, directed Sky High and Longinus, wrote and directed Godzilla Final Wars, did the story for Samurai Zombie, directed and wrote Lupin the Third, and produced Battlefield Baseball. For your actors, you had Koji Goto, Yoshihiro Okamoto, who also was actor, effects director, and assistant director, Keishiro Susumu, who was an actor and assistant director and produced Versus, Masami Miyota, Nobuhiko Morino, who was also an actor in Versus, Alive, Sky High, Yakuza Weapon, Deadball, Samurai Zombie, Roku, and Godzilla Final Wars. They were the composer for those films. and then they also produced Down to Hell and did effects for it. You had Yudai Yamaguchi as your camera operator and co-editor, who did
a fair few things.
Yeah, they wrote Alive, Battlefield Baseball, Meatball Machine, 10 Nights of Dreams, The 10th Night Sequence, Yakuza Weapon, and Deadball. They were director on Yakuza Weapon with Tak Sakaguchi and Deadball, Final Deadball, ABCs of Death, J's for Jidaigeki, Roku, The Promise of the Witch. So they do a lot. And then you had, for your production assistants, you had Tak Sakaguchi, Minoru Matsumoto, Kenji Matsuda, Takehiro Katayama, and Kazuhito Onba, which all were people from Versus. So that was pretty exciting. I think they had a total of like 30 people work on the film, if you add everybody up.
Right.
So not a bad little crew.
No, not at all.
But I mean, it's a fun film. It's a little slow.
Yeah. But it's a decent little short film, I'd say.
I agree. And for Kitamura's first, it's very obvious. Like his style is very clear in the angles and the editing and the action.
And it very much does kind of feel like a proto-versus. Like
right.
The comedy isn't there. The zombie kind of there, kind of not. Yeah.
But I also think it's different enough from Versus that it stands on its own.
Right. Oh, yeah, no. 100%.
Which is nice. I love it when a, like Dark Star. Dark Star is different enough from Alien that it kind of stands on its own and it doesn't need that Alien connection for it to be...
Right. There's a different tone.
And I think you see that with this Down to Hell as well. I think it's very obvious that... I mean, it makes sense why Versus initially was supposed to be a sequel, and then it became so different that they were like...
It kind of... The forest even kind of looks like one of the forests from Versus, like early on.
I mean, they did film in some of the same spots.
I had a funny feeling. I wasn't entirely sure.
I mentioned that in the Versus episode.
I don't remember if you said that. I haven't edited that one yet.
Oh. Well, I said that.
Well, that's great. Now I know.
You should listen to our Versus episode so you know what we're talking about.
I don't have a choice.
Fair enough. I liked it overall. I think Down to Hell is a fun and entertaining short film. I wish it was so everything we've covered was a bonus feature on the Versus Blu-ray except for Down to Hell. It was included on a German DVD release, but it was not included on the Arrow Video Blu-ray release for some reason. Which is weird, because I feel like out of the 4 things that we've talked about, that is worth including the most.
Right. Granted, still keep Nervous 2 at least.
Right. No, I feel like Nervous 2, and Down to Hell all have a very special spot in the cult of Versus. I think all have their merits. More so than Versus FF version.
Well, but that's not a high bar.
This is true. So, I like it. I enjoy it. Out of curiosity, do you want to rank Down to Hell with our zombie movies?
Is it really a zombie movie though? I mean, I guess he does come back to life.
He does. It's zombie enough. It's zombie-esque.
Is that our justification?
We'll include it. I'll include it.
Okay.
So do you want to do a ranking with Down to Hell?
Well, I guess so.
So let's go ahead and I want to say we're going to agree on.
I feel like we're going to agree on number 5.
I agree. So number 5, we'll say in 3, 2, 1. Stacy Attack of the Schoolgirl Zombies. Again, awful movie, very creepy.
Suffering, boring, pedo bait.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Now I think this is where I think our list might diverge. So tell me what your number 4 is going to be.
See, I'm not entirely sure. I guess number 4 would be. I don't know. I might put Down to Hell there. I guess.
Really?
I guess. I don't know. I'm not really sure, to be honest. Like, I guess. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of unfair because Down to Hell is literally like
half the length of all of these.
A no budget short film. So I don't think it's really fair for it.
In all fairness, though, One Cut of the Dead had a budget of $25,000.
Sure.
Which, I mean, it's still significantly more than Down to Hell, but that had a lower budget than Stacy, Junk, and Versus.
Right, but I wouldn't actively say that Junk is spoilers for my next film. I wouldn't really actively say that it's actually worse than Junk, I think I slightly enjoyed Junk more, but even then it's barely really. I like both pretty much equally. I kind of see. I don't know. I'm kind of just thinking on the spot on the ranking. I'm not, as you can probably tell, I'm not really certain on it, frankly.
See, it's funny you say that because I would put my number 4 as Down to Hell, and I would confidently say that. Mm-hmm. And my reasoning is the fight in the middle of the movie drags on way too long.
I'll agree with Junk.
I
think Junk has a little bit better pacing overall.
Right. Junk is just copycat after copycat, but it's not. It doesn't drag per se. I can be invested enough in it so that I can be okay. There's enough action. There's enough interest. I can move through that. For Down to Hell,
there's enough going on.
It's just there's not the middle part of the opening is great. The rising action is good. The climax is boring. The lowering action is okay, and the resolution's good. It's that climax and lowering action part of the plot that doesn't work for me.
Right.
It's too slow and anticlimactic.
Right.
For it to be.
I feel like it would work. I would probably like it more if you cut about
5 minutes,
3 to 5 minutes from that climax fight.
I agree. If you cut it down,
cut down the chase bit as well.
If you cut it down to about 43, 42 minutes, I think this would be perfect.
Right.
I think it would be a perfect length for this type of narrative. Or if you could just add more to the story, add some lore, that would work. But with what we're given, just cut 5 to 6 minutes out, and I think you've got a decent story.
Right.
So there's my I would put Down to Hell and then Junk, and then we both know what we're going to say is our number 2 and our number 1.
Right.
So if you want to hear us talk about those a little bit more,
go watch those episodes.
And definitely go. So, like, if you haven't listened to our Versus episode, you really need to, because we talk about our ranking. We talk
I'm
about.
gonna be honest. If you're watching this and haven't seen the Versus episode, what are you doing? Go watch that.
And at this point, like, you need to just go. Like, there's so much more to cover.
What are you doing?
We covered Down to Hell a little bit more. We cover Versus way more, and we talk about our ranking. And then if you want to hear a deeper explanation for our ranking, go listen to all of those episodes as well.
Mm-hmm.
My number 2, I have Versus.
For me, One Cut of the Dead.
And then for my number 1, I have One Cut of the Dead.
Versus for me.
So, interesting. Our rankings didn't really change at all.
No.
And we agreed.
Right.
Surprisingly enough, because usually the way it works is we'll agree on what the worst is, and then everything else kind of like is different, right?
To an extent. I feel like most of our rankings are similar. There's usually just one or two significant like differences, I'd say.
But like this month, it just feels like we agree. I mean, even Versus and One Cut of the Dead, the reason that I put One Cut of the Dead higher is I like the explanation of filmmaking.
I feel like with those two, our placements for both of those kind of is because of both your and I's personalities as well.
Right. This isn't a jab.
Those reflect our personalities.
Right. And that this isn't a jab, but I feel like for you it's a little more style over substance, right? Like
I like a mix of style and substance, but I can enjoy style without substance from time to time.
For me, I need that substance to be engaged enough, which Versus has enough for me to be engaged, but the style brings it home. I love that. And Kitamura clearly, with a budget, could perfect his style, because Down to Hell has his style. It's there. But due to the budget, he couldn't make it what he wanted.
Right.
But that makes the story of Versus all the more interesting and all the more amazing, because within 3 years, he
really comes into his own in Versus, honestly.
He does, and it's great, and it continues to develop. You see it in Alive, and I mean, I've only seen Alive and then Final Wars. I own Azumi, I own Origami. I want to buy Sky High. I'd love to watch Longinus, but I firmly believe as those movies, like as you keep watching them, you see that style continue to solidify itself as Ryuhei Kitamura to the grand finale of his establishment with Final Wars.
Right.
And Final Wars is undoubtedly a Kitamura
film.
Like, that's one where I would say it should be labeled like how you have Akira Kurosawa's, Rashomon, Seven Samurai, whatever. Ryuhei Kitamura's Godzilla Final Wars. I feel like that's how that should be marketed.
Mm.
Like there was a clear there was an essay in Versus talking about how Tartan Films, when they were releasing the J-horror boom and the very like extreme Asian extreme stuff under that label, they were labeling it as like Takashi Shimizu's Merbito and like Takashi Miike's I'm trying to I don't know. Audition. I think it was Takashi Miike's Audition. You had like Takashi Miike's One Missed Call, and you had you had these establishment of the artist over the art,
right? And
they did that, and even on the Arrow Video release or on Arrow Video stuff, like you have Hideo Nakata's Dark Water.
Oh, Dark Water.
They don't market Ring as Hideo Nakata, but they do for Dark Water. But for Versus, they put a Ryuhei Kitamura film Versus. they establish that artist because Versus is a very clear Kitamura film. And I feel like you could do that with Final Wars as well, and it would make so much more sense.
Mm-hmm.
It would make all the difference because that is what the film is. It is a Ryuhei Kitamura film.
Undoubtedly. So, with that being said, do you have any last thoughts?
Honestly, I feel like that's the best way to summarize Versus and Down to Hell.
No, I think you summed it up basically perfectly.
I think I rest my case.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is actually kind of a nice little easy episode following the
rather long episodes.
Yeah, this is a bonus. This is a true bonus.
Yeah, it's shorter. It saves my life. It's shorter.
Now, before we wrap it up here, we do need to do the most noblest of podcasting traditions.
Of course.
So, Rex, why don't you start us off?
Oh, well, dear listeners, you can find me on YouTube at Rexino, on Twitter at Rex_Xenomorph, on Instagram, Rex_Xeno. And if you want to check out some of my writing, go take a look at the Tokusatsu Network.
And as for me, hello, I'm Elijah. You can find me on YouTube at ET13 Productions, where my most recent short film, SOS Seek Shelter, is available for viewing, and my other short films will be available very soon. Outside of that, you can follow me on Twitter at ET13_Productions, where I talk about news and updates and all that good stuff. Along with that, you can find me on Instagram at ET13 Productions, where I showcase my action figure photography. Outside of that, you can find me on the Monsters with Attitude YouTube channel, where I appear maybe once a month on our monthly live streams talking about a kaiju topic. Outside of that, I also do some videos and some edits. I did the intro for their channel, so definitely check that out. You can also join the Monsters with Attitude Facebook group. It's a great community. We got a lot of fun people, a lot of cool posts in there, and I'm a moderator, so definitely check that out. I also am a writer for Kaiju United. I most recently published an article on Godzilla -1 and Takashi Yamazaki. So if you want to check out more about -1 and Yamazaki-san, definitely check that out. I also contributed to the book Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kids Guide, which you can find on Amazon or any major retail store for books, where I talk about Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. And I think that's all I do. Definitely keep an eye out. I will be doing more work, and I will be talking more about the stuff that I'm working on as I'm able to. But with that, I think we're going to wrap things up here. So we're going to do our typical sign-off. Now, before I say this, I do want to say, for anybody who's been listening and has provided feedback, we do have a few people. We pre-recorded all of the episodes prior to this. I do see it, but we're going to put it on a main episode because you guys deserve being on a main episode. Not so much the bonus. We talk about it on our main. So the next main episode, which will be coming soon, definitely keep an eye out for that. That will have all of that stuff. So without further ado, the sign off. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes. That boosts our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, I do. I use a MacBook to do this podcast. But you can rate us on Spotify. If you want to stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, you can follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook at the same handle. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, you know the drill. And we'll read your reviews on air for everyone to hear. Again, on main episodes, we will do that, so stay tuned for our feedback. We will be reading it. We also have a Teespring store. Eventually, we'll have original artwork on there, but until then, you can sport our awesome logo on a t-shirt or maybe even like a coffee mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. It's a great community full of great people. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. We sometimes post exclusives to the channel like bloopers for episodes or minisodes talking about news or other subjects. We also have an interview with ProjectGodzilla designer Jared Kurchevsky on the channel, and I definitely butchered his name. I'm so sorry, I apologize. A huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and all the other content we upload. His links can be found in the description below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to Danny DeManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website, GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Grattan Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following the podcast on Twitter at Giant Monster BS or on any podcast platform under the name Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here. So thank you guys so much for listening. It's been fun talking about zombie movies in the horror month. We are now into November. Get ready for some Godzilla, some exciting stuff. -1 is almost here. We will be celebrating and hyping that up. So stay tuned.
Looking pretty
Thank
good.
you guys. It's looking great. So stay tuned. Thank you guys so much for listening. And as always, please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys.
Bye.
We are set, we are in debt. There's nothing to sweat. Life's too short now, baby. And not too big now, baby. Conversation. His name's Elijah, baby. And also Rex now, baby. We love those kaiju, baby. And you will too now.